From the very first moments of Welcome to Derry, the show has been dropping breadcrumbs so subtle that they almost disappear if you blink. And yet, when you trace them back, Episode 6 acts as a key that unlocks nearly every hidden layer of the series' narrative. This theory explains that Pennywise's influence on Derry, Mrs. Kersh's past, the black spot, and even Halloran's psychic struggles are not isolated events but parts of a single, horrifying design that has been building since the pilot. Support this content by liking, sharing, and subscribing for more upcoming theories. In the opening scenes of Episode 6, we see Ronnie and Lily clashing over the decision to revisit the sewers. On the surface, it seems like ordinary teenage frustration, but here's where the breadcrumbs begin. The aggression and paranoia between the kids reflect Pennywise's subtle manipulation over the town. Even children, whose innocence should shield them, are being warped. A clue from the previous episode reveals that Leroy, overwhelmed by grief and guilt over Polly's death, lashes out at his own son, showing how Pennywise's reach extends even into parental relationships, amplifying fear and distrust to a lethal degree. This theory explains that Pennywise thrives not just on terror, but on human tension and conflict, feeding on emotions as much as he does on flesh. The narrative deepens when Mrs. Kersh, previously a background presence, steps fully into the spotlight. Lily discovers her attic filled with clown costumes, photographs of Pennywise, and strange trinkets. This shows us a hidden detail. Mrs. Kersh has been living a double life, inhabiting the persona of Periwinkle, and all along she has been both observer and participant in Pennywise's web. Her obsession began with her father, Bob Gray, the circus clown identity that Pennywise once wore. When she lost him as a child, she sought any way to reconnect, and this theory explains that her descent into madness was a combination of grief, hope, and the clown's manipulative power. Periwinkle wasn't just a costume, it was a lifeline, a bridge to a father she never truly had, and simultaneously, a tool of the monster who recognized her desperation and exploited it. The terrifying reality unfolds further when Mrs. Kersh recounts her history to Lily. She admits to having led children to the clown, believing this act would bring her closer to her father. A clue from the previous episode reveals that the cemetery photo, once assumed to show Pennywise, was actually her in the Periwinkle costume. Adults could perceive her because she was human, not supernatural. This theory explains that her actions were both tragic and horrifying, a combination of misplaced loyalty, delusion, and manipulation. Each child she directed to the monster was a casualty of her obsession, but also a testament to Pennywise's cunning, which turns even love into a weapon. Meanwhile, Episode 6's ending shifts focus to the Black Spot, a masked mob fueled by the town's prejudices and a belief that Hank Grogan is guilty of the theater murders, converges on the location with the intention of vigilante justice. This shows us a hidden detail. Pennywise's influence is not limited to the innocent or the lost. He also exploits systemic failings and societal hatred. The main Legion of White Decency, a supremacist group, is manipulated by fear and misinformation, and their actions indirectly feed Pennywise's hunger. This theory explains that the monster's power thrives in chaos, prejudice, and the breakdown of rational order. Derry itself is as much a character in this story as any child or clown, and Pennywise knows how to pull its strings. At the same time, Halloran's subplot reveals another layer of this intricate web. By sharing the concept of his shining and the metaphorical box in which he has locked his powers, we understand that Pennywise does not just feed on fear, but is capable of exploiting psychic potential. A clue from the previous episode reveals that Halloran sees the spirit of Polly immediately after his death. This shows us a hidden detail. The clown is aware of Halloran's capabilities and manipulates the environment to challenge or provoke him. This theory explains that Halloran represents a potential threat to Pennywise, not because of physical strength, but because of his ability to perceive the supernatural directly. The tension between Halloran's moral struggle and his psychic awareness creates one of the most potent narrative levers in the episode. Returning to Mrs. Kersh, the narrative takes an even darker turn when the story reveals her affair with Hank Grogan. What initially seems like a subplot about desire and personal connection is reframed as another thread of Pennywise's manipulations. This theory explains that by steering Ingrid through her adult persona toward Hank, Pennywise orchestrates events so that Hank is left vulnerable to the town's racism, amplifying fear and suspicion, and ultimately creating a harvestable environment of terror. A clue from earlier episodes, such as the false accusations against Hank, ties directly into this, revealing a pattern. Pennywise preys not only on fear in the abstract, but also on societal and personal fractures that make the town weak and divided. Episode 6 also emphasizes the psychological strain of Derry's youth. Lily, Ronnie, and the other children are caught in escalating paranoia, mistrust, and the shadow of their own actions. This shows us a hidden detail. Pennywise's power is cumulative, layering on itself over time. Each episode, each moment of fear, and each microaggression within the children's circle builds a feedback loop that makes them more vulnerable, more susceptible, and ultimately more controllable. This theory explains that the sewers, the clown, and even Periwinkle are not isolated horror tropes. They are deliberate instruments in a broader mechanism designed to destabilize Derry mentally, emotionally, and socially. Then there's the significance of Periwinkle as a mirror to Pennywise's deeper strategies. By embodying Periwinkle, Mrs. Kersh operates as both predator and enabler. A clue from the previous episode reveals that adults saw the clown in the cemetery photo because it was her in costume. This subtle misdirection, when layered over the children's perception of supernatural threats, explains the psychological complexity Pennywise engineers. He doesn't just kill. He redirects suspicion, warps perception, and creates puppet players like Mrs. Kersh, who both facilitate and embody his terror. Each act of seeming autonomy in Ingrid's actions is subtly guided by the monster's omnipresent influence. As the episode closes, the black spot is threatened with burning by townspeople acting under the influence of fear and misinformation. This shows us a hidden detail. The black spot is more than a building. It is a symbolic locus of the town's collective dread and prejudice. Pennywise's manipulation of the mob demonstrates how he exploits large-scale human psychology alongside intimate, personal fear. This theory explains that Derry's history, the racial tensions, and the social scapegoating are all tools in his arsenal, turning human cruelty into fuel for his sustenance. The intersection of personal tragedy, such as Hank's plight, with societal horror, like the Black Spot mob, highlights the terrifying reach of his influence. Halloran's narrative thread intersects with the climax in ways that underline the stakes. His locked box of psychic abilities, now breached by Pennywise, illustrates the clown's method of identifying threats and converting latent power into fear. A clue from the previous episode reveals that his visions are both warnings and taunts, shaping decisions and planting doubt. This theory explains that Halloran's potential as a moral and psychic counterforce is central to the narrative. He embodies the idea that the human mind, when unlocked, may challenge the monster in ways brute force never could. His struggle is internal and external, personal and universal, linking the psychic, the emotional, and the societal threads of the series. All these strands converge in the final moments of Episode 6, where Mrs. Kersh, fully in Periwinkle, is seen preparing to lure yet more children to Pennywise. This shows us a hidden detail. The cycle of manipulation, longing, and terror is self-perpetuating. Ingrid's desire to reconnect with a lost father figure has been twisted into a mechanism for feeding the monster. A clue from earlier episodes demonstrates how carefully the series has laid this groundwork. Her earlier appearances, the cemetery photo, and the unsettling calm in the face of horror all hinted at her dual role as victim and enabler. This theory explains that Derry itself is the stage, Pennywise is the conductor, and Ingrid/Periwinkle is both instrument and accomplice, all orchestrated to perfection. Moreover, the interwoven narrative of the children, Halloran, and the townspeople underscores how the horror of Derry is systemic. Pennywise does not act in isolation. He manipulates, exploits, and amplifies every weakness, every fear, and every tension in the social fabric. The black spot, the accusations against Hank, the subtle coercions in childhood relationships, and the psychic manipulations against Halloran combine into a grand design of terror that is both personal and communal. This theory explains that Episode 6 is the hinge point where all these threads snap into alignment, revealing a carefully constructed ecosystem of fear. Even the visual storytelling supports this intricate network of manipulation. The cinematography during the black spot scenes, the framing of Periwinkle in her attic, and the fleeting shadows in the sewer sequences all communicate a constant, unseen pressure, a reminder that Pennywise's gaze is everywhere. A clue from previous episodes reveals how spatial awareness in Derry, sewers, basements, streets, and attics is weaponized, shaping perception and guiding choices without direct intervention. This theory explains that Pennywise's influence operates at all levels, psychological, emotional, and physical, turning the town into a living instrument of horror. By the end of episode 6, the audience is left with a chilling realization. The horror isn't just in the clown's appearance, the missing children, or the haunted buildings. The horror is structural, psychological, and intimate. Mrs. Kersh/Periwinkle is the most humanized vector of this horror. Her actions reveal how trauma, longing, and manipulation intersect with supernatural evil to produce outcomes far more terrifying than raw violence alone. This theory explains that the show's genius lies in weaving all these threads, societal, familial, psychic, and supernatural, into a tapestry where every small act, every whispered clue, and every hidden detail contributes to the grand crescendo of terror. In conclusion, episode 6 of it, Welcome to Derry, is not just an installment in a horror series. It is the fulcrum around which the entire season pivots. Every tension, every manipulation, every breadcrumb from previous episodes finds its place here. The aggression among children, the subtle corruptions of adults, the ritualistic behaviors of Periwinkle, the psychic struggles of Halloran, and the social fractures surrounding the Black Spot all coalesce to form a single, horrifying orchestration of terror. This theory explains that Pennywise's genius is not only in killing or scaring, it is in controlling, shaping, and exploiting every layer of human experience, turning fear, grief, and desire into a perpetual feeding cycle. Derry is a living organism, the children and townspeople are its nerves and veins, and Pennywise is the unseen force, orchestrating it all, with episode 6 revealing how meticulously every thread has been connected. The expanded view of episode 6, connecting every hidden clue, demonstrates the depth of manipulation at play, highlighting Mrs. Kersh's tragic role as both victim and enabler, the systemic exploitation of societal hatred at the Black Spot, and the potential for psychic resistance through Halloran. A clue from the previous episodes underscores the subtle brilliance of the show. Nothing is wasted, every appearance matters, and every action has a consequence. This theory explains that episode 6 is the moment when the seemingly separate narrative strands align, revealing the full scope of Pennywise's influence and the horrifying truth of Derry itself.
Sweetheart, it's okay. It's just a balloon.
From the moment Ingrid Kersh first stepped into it, Welcome to Derry, there was something quietly unsettling about her. Something soft, broken, and haunting. Not loud, not monstrous, just off. Like she was living in two realities at once. The world the other kids lived in, and another world hidden beneath the floorboards of Derry itself. And when episode 6 finally reveals her last name, Kersh, the entire story snaps into a new shape. Everything that once felt confusing suddenly feels intentional. This is where the breadcrumbs begin, because this theory explains that Ingrid might not just be a random girl trapped in Derry's nightmare. She may be Pennywise's daughter, or the daughter of the man Pennywise once pretended to be, Bob Gray.
It's me, Papa.
Support this content by liking, sharing, and subscribing for more upcoming theories. The show never outright confirms this, but that's what makes the theory so chilling. Instead of telling us directly, it hides clues everywhere, and each one makes the connection deeper, darker, and more heartbreaking. The first hidden detail appears way back in episode 1. Ingrid doesn't interact with the group the same way the other kids do. She moves like a shadow. She drifts. She always seems lost, like she's looking for something only she can see. When everyone else panicked at the strange events around town, Ingrid remained eerily calm. She wasn't shocked by the supernatural. She wasn't scared by the clown sightings. This theory explains that she didn't react because she had already lived with the clown's presence her entire life. One of the biggest clues now hits harder in hindsight. The cemetery photo. Early in the series, the kids capture a picture where Pennywise appears to be standing in the background, blurry and haunting. Everyone, including the audience, assumes it's the clown. But in episode 6, we learn the shocking truth. It wasn't Pennywise at all. It was Ingrid in her clown persona, Periwinkle. This detail shows us something incredibly important. Adults could see the clown in the photo because there was no supernatural illusion. It was a real girl dressed like a clown, wandering around Derry because she wanted her father to find her. A clue from the previous episode reveals that Ingrid was already trying to imitate the figure she believed abandoned her, Bob Gray, the traveling circus clown she remembers from childhood. This is where the emotional tragedy of Ingrid's story starts to bloom. She didn't wear the Periwinkle costume for fun. She wore it because she believed it would call her father back to her. She wanted him to recognize her, to see her, to return. This theory explains that Ingrid built her entire identity around a father who vanished and a clown who noticed her longing. Pennywise didn't lure Ingrid with fear like he does to every other child. He lured her with the illusion of love. And because Pennywise is a creature who feeds on desperation, she became the perfect target. Episode 6 delivers the darkest breadcrumb of all. The opening scene shows Ingrid leading a young child down into the basement of Juniper Hill, following a red balloon. The camera holds on her face. Not cruel, not gleeful, not even scared. Just blank. Empty, detached. Like a girl carrying out a routine she doesn't fully understand. Moments later, the child is gone. The clown has claimed another victim. This theory explains that Ingrid isn't acting from malice. She's acting from a place of longing, confusion, and emotional manipulation. Ingrid later tells Lily she led many children to the clown downstairs. This isn't a one-time accident. It's something she's been doing for years. And here's the twisted question the show leaves us with. Did she believe the children were safe? Or had Pennywise convinced her that feeding him was an act of devotion? This theory explains that Ingrid may have had a fractured understanding of what was happening. Her mind, already fragile, may have built lies to protect her from the truth. Maybe she genuinely believed the clown was her father, and helping him was her way of reconnecting. Maybe she never even realized those children were dying. The series never answers this, and that mystery makes her story even more tragic. Let's go deeper into the hidden clues. Earlier episodes show Ingrid following Lily and her friends. At first, this seemed like classic creepy behavior, a quiet, strange girl stalking the group. But now we see it differently. This shows us a hidden detail. Ingrid wasn't following them out of malice. She was following them because she sensed they were getting closer to the clown. She saw them exploring dangerous places. She saw them chasing answers. And she hoped, deep down, heartbreakingly, that they might lead her to Pennywise, to her father, to the man she still believed was searching for her. There's another breadcrumb hidden in plain sight, Ingrid's affair with Hank Grogan. At the time, it felt awkward and out of character. But seen through this theory, the entire situation becomes one of the most chilling manipulations in the series. The theory suggests that Pennywise influenced Ingrid into starting that affair, not out of love, but out of strategy. Because when Ingrid slept with Hank, she unknowingly left him without an alibi during the theater murders. Pennywise knew that if a black man in Derry became the prime suspect, the town's racism would explode. Fear, anger, blame, hate. A feast for a creature like him. Here's where the breadcrumbs begin to link. This theory explains that Pennywise doesn't just eat children, he feeds on emotional storms. He feeds on the ugliness of the town itself. And Ingrid, without understanding what she was doing, became a tool to help him generate the perfect storm. She wasn't just manipulated in moments, she was manipulated throughout her entire life. Pennywise didn't use fear for her. He used affection, attention, the shadows of fatherhood. Every flash of approval twisted her deeper into his orbit. This becomes even more painful when we consider something the show quietly reveals but doesn't emphasize. Pennywise never harms Ingrid. He kills countless children. He toys with their minds. He shapeshifts into their nightmares. But he never hurts her. He never even threatens her. That is one of the strongest clues of all. Pennywise either sees her as his child or as a rare emotional delicacy he wants to preserve. Either explanation makes Ingrid one of the most unique victims in the entire It universe. Now, let's revisit her childhood. Ingrid remembers Bob Gray as her father, a smiling man in circus makeup who used to perform and charm audiences. But this shows us a hidden detail. What if Bob Gray wasn't a real man at all? What if Pennywise chose that identity decades earlier and used it to manipulate Ingrid's mother? What if Ingrid was raised by a version of Pennywise before she ever knew what he truly was? This theory explains that her memories might be fragments of encounters that were never real. Pennywise, after all, doesn't just shape fear, he shapes reality. He shapes perception. He shapes childhood. If a creature like him wanted a daughter, he could manufacture one, not biologically, but psychologically. Imagine being a little girl whose father disappears, and then imagine that the only thing that returns is a monster pretending to be him. A clue from the previous episode reveals that Ingrid had moments of lucidity. She laughed with friends. She flirted awkwardly. She wanted connection. But these moments were overshadowed by the fog that hung around her. She was a girl living in a dream Pennywise orchestrated, a puppet who didn't realize she had strings. And this is why her future appearance as Mrs. Kersh in Chapter 2 feels so devastating. By the time Beverly Marsh meets her decades later, Ingrid is no longer just strange. She's hollow. She's consumed by decades of trauma, manipulation, and the twisted love she once believed was real. The young Ingrid who wandered Derry looking for her father becomes an adult who embodies Derry's curse. Her entire life becomes a reflection of what Pennywise does best: break people slowly, softly, until they barely resemble what they once were. This theory paints Ingrid not as a side character, but as the emotional heart of Derry's darkest secret. She represents the long-term victims, the ones Pennywise doesn't kill, but the ones he molds. She is the child who loved the monster. She is the girl who dressed as a clown to be seen. She is the teenager who followed red balloons like breadcrumbs. She is the confused soul who led children to their deaths because she thought she was reconnecting with family. She is the woman who eventually becomes a haunting figure living alone, still trapped under Pennywise's shadow. And if this theory is right, Ingrid Kersh is not just a tragic character. She is the ultimate symbol of how Pennywise consumes not just bodies, but minds, memories, and identities. Her story is the darkest reminder that Pennywise's true power isn't in killing. It's in shaping a life until it no longer belongs to the person living it. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more mind-blowing theories like this, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming deep dives.